Now, where we're standing right now was the original breach site. And one of the things that was part of the mainstream media narrative initially was that it was the Proud Boys who originally breached the barrier that existed. But a review of time-stamped video seems to indicate that right here, there was a Ray Epps inspired breach. I encourage folks to go to Revolver.News and check out some in-depth reporting on this individual Ray Epps. But it's one of the glimpses into what really animated the criminal acuity of this day. One thing I found really interesting, Brian, is that the breach occurs here like not even with enough time for President Trump to conclude his remarks. You're seeing breach and activity here before that ended. So while all of the effort a year ago and even a day ago has been directed at President Trump, here before that speech ends, we see this breach, and by a very person who the night before is telling everyone to fill the Capitol. Yes. Did you want to go over some elements of that timeline as it relates to this geography?
Let's do that, and thank you, Matt. So if you all are not familiar with who Ray Epps is, I encourage you to check it out. Ray Epps is a man on January 5th that was here in Washington, D.C., telling people that they were going to go in the Capitol, encouraging them to do it. That should have never been done. Ray Epps was here. We have the time mark, and this is on videos that are widely available.
Before the Proud Boys get here, interestingly.
Yes, before the Proud Boys. 90 minutes before Trump's speech was scheduled to begin, Ray Epps was at the Washington Monument at 10:24 a.m.
Which is a clear shot right down the mall this way.
Right, and this is the way that people would have walked. They would have gone this path. This is the way they did walk, and he was set up there. The next thing that happened at 40 minutes before Trump concluded his speech, there at 12:31 p.m., other operators were waiting here at the Capitol, and they were actually cutting the fence away.
Now, there was fencing over here. Just important to understand where that is. Yeah. There was some temporary fencing here, and what Congresswoman Greene's talking about are folks who, again, before President Trump has concluded his remarks, are removing fencing that could have been a line demarking what was a protest or what was an incursion onto federal property. And so you could just imagine in these open fields here, if fences exist and then were being cut down, someone might have walked up and assumed it was a continuation of the mall and then been drawn into that. That's why that time frame is so important.
Because if you're, if you've never been to Washington, D.C. before, you just aren't familiar. You wouldn't know. But if fences were cut and moved away before the mass crowds came in, just like you just said, they wouldn't have known. So who were these people cutting the fences? That's extremely important. These are questions we want to know. I didn't see any of those people in the D.C. jail here. They are not wasting away under Deputy Warden Kathleen Landerkin. Here's another thing that we need to talk about. The Proud Boys arrived at the Peace Monument at 12:45 p.m. That was 25 minutes before Trump concluded. Then at 12:50, at 21 minutes before Trump concludes his speech, Be Civil megaphone guy trespasses deep in the Capitol lawn. Who is this person? We don't have his name, but he had a megaphone and was saying, be civil. Now, after that, at 20 minutes, Trump is still speaking, everyone. 20 minutes left in his speech. This is at between 12:50, 12:53. The Capitol barricades were breached. So if the Capitol barricades were breached when President Trump still has 20 minutes left in his speech, how did President Trump incite this riot at the Capitol? I'm going to argue he did not. So the next thing that happened, that was at the Ray Epps breach site, which is
where we are.
Right here.
We've seen the video. Revolver.News has that video of Ray Epps, whispering in people's ears, and you can see a movement. It's the last thing.
The last thing that happens before the initial breach that paves the way for this flood of people is Ray Epps whispering into someone's ear. Now, the January 6th committee has put preservation demands on our phone records. They've asked every question of every person who was far away from this site, but the January 6th committee hasn't asked one question of the person who whispers into the ears of the first breachers right as that's happening. But we have to understand these events in concert. So you got the fences coming down, you got the breach site here, and just over our shoulder, this is where there was a large scaffolding that was erected for the media to be able to capture the events of that day. And an individual, we'll call him Scaffold Commander, is at the top of that structure with a bullhorn giving orders to people to move forward in this authoritative way. And so, as we're standing here today, kind of thinking through the investigation of this moment, you got a flood of people, you've got an instigating event, you got fences coming down, and then you got a guy telling people where they have to move. And the common thread between the instigator, the fence cutter, and the commander is that none of them have been questioned by the FBI or the Department of Justice or the January 6th committee. And you just got to wonder if there's some boomers in Homer, Alaska who have their houses raided because someone thinks they have Nancy Pelosi's laptop, which they didn't. Why hasn't there been a focus on these questions? And I think that in all the narrative of the day, we didn't want that to get lost. The important geography of this moment, the timing sequence of events, and I think Congresswoman Greene can further illuminate that time frame.
Absolutely, and it's so important to talk about who is scaffold commander, because when he was up on the scaffolding, getting ready to tell people to go in as they were coming, President Trump was still speaking, everyone. He had 7 minutes left in his speech. So this is when he started urging people that had made their way here. He started urging people to go in. I didn't see this guy or meet this guy in the D.C. jail. He has not been found. He has not been charged. And these are the things that are seriously concerning to me, as people's private phone records, their bank records, are being subpoenaed by the January 6th committee. Why doesn't the January 6th committee care about Ray Epps, some man that's urging people on a scaffold to go into the Capitol, people that are cutting fences away? These should be the targets of the security breach here at the Capitol that came in that day, not innocent people in the Trump administration that were doing nothing wrong, interns, people that weren't even here that day, as the Department of Justice wants to continue to go after.
And if there's a perfectly good explanation for all this, we'd sure like to hear it. Yes. That's why Congresswoman Greene and I have been joined with a number of other of our colleagues sending letters posing these questions to FBI Director Wray, to Attorney General Garland. We even went by the Department of Justice to have a meeting to maybe clear some of these things up, because what's fundamentally unfair is we've got tens of millions of Americans who feel smeared by this moment that they may have been entrapped in. And as we travel the country, people think, well, gosh, I'm not an insurrectionist. I'm just a patriotic American who believes that we could probably always improve our elections, and we should ensure that we've got peaceful transitions of power and transitions that the country can have confidence in, a Congress able to debate these questions. And those folks don't deserve what's happening to them today, what's happened to them over the course of this last year. And there's been different amounts of acuity of that targeting. Certainly, Congresswoman Greene has really led the oversight effort into the conditions of the D.C. jail, but really even regular Americans who are deplatformed off of the digital world because they might have posted something that was MAGA or America First. That shouldn't be happening in our country, especially when this just has a very booby-trapped feel to it. To many of us, and that's why there needs to be an understanding why folks are on the FBI list and off the FBI list. Brian, one thing that we still haven't gotten an answer to is that Ray Epps in the initial days after January 6th is put on the list of individuals that the federal government is interested in talking to, the top 20, as a matter of fact. And then the day after, Revolver.News publishes a piece on Stuart Rhodes, who may or may not have been a federal asset or informant, then all of a sudden he's wiped off that list. And so I think any American, no matter how you feel about January 6th, no matter how you feel about Marjorie and I, we know we're not for everyone. We know we have our critics. Some of them are here. But one thing we do think everyone deserves an answer to is why there would be this oscillation, this unexplainable change. And while the Attorney General certainly took occasion yesterday to reflect on his ongoing efforts to target people, it certainly didn't do a lot to illuminate the actions that have already occurred and that are unexplainable from the FBI and the DOJ.